Well, it's a new year. Happy 2021, everybody. I know I'm a bit late to this, but I've been planning some things out for the channel for this year. As you all probably already know, I've done a lot of different things here on the channel without any real consistency to it. Really, a lot of the content was pretty random in terms of style and schedule. But this year, I kinda wanted to keep things simple. Kind of. I spent the last few weeks putting together a list of potential topics to talk about on the channel, some being a bit weird and different, like today's video. Hopefully this will make the channel a bit more interesting for this year, and hopefully it'll give the channel a bit more consistency as well, while at the same time having that random aspect to it. Because let's be honest, it really wouldn't be me if it wasn't random. Anyways, today I wanted to start the channel's 2021 off with a bang. A great video, one that will be remembered for the years to come. So, what will this video be on? This meme. Okay, so I'm kind of trolling and kind of not trolling when I say this video is about this meme. While the video is not really about it, this meme does surprisingly play an essential role in today's topic. First, let's go back a bit to when I found this meme. I was scrolling through Facebook one day in December of last year, completely bored out of my mind. I usually resort to Facebook when I'm bored because despite the common misconception that Facebook is a site only used by boomers now, it's a site that's only used by boomers now, and I'm a fucking boomer despite being 19, don't judge me. Anyways, Facebook surprisingly has some good memes on it, and I'm not talking about the bullshit memes that middle-aged women look at. I'm talking about things like this beauty right here. During one of my random scrolling on Facebook sessions, I ran into this picture on a random post and I immediately became hooked. I mean, can you blame me? It looks enough to get anybody's attention. It looks absolutely cursed, there's little context, and it was close to Christmas, so it was perfect timing to use it to haunt my friends on Discord and on my channel, which is why I ended up posting this picture to. Little did I know this picture would lead me down a very strange yet interesting path that would eventually lead to a man known as Dougal Dixon. When I started this script, I didn't know who Dougal Dixon was, nor did I realize how big of a name he was until I did the research for this video. In fact, I'm pretty sure he and his work have already been covered in other videos in the past, ones that fell under my radar. But seeing how it's not necessarily a topic that's talked about to death and how I am presenting it in a different way to a different audience with different pieces of information that's focused more on the behind the scenes of his work than the actual concepts featured within, I feel like this video is somewhat necessary in those regards. So join me as I talk about the history behind the strangest book series I've ever seen, the After Trilogy. Dougal Dixon is a very interesting man. He is known for his works and knowledge in paleontology, zoology, geology, and many other scientific fields. And he's taken his expertise in these fields and made several books out of them, his most notable ones being books based around dinosaurs and speculative fiction. Chances are you've seen some of his stuff throughout the internet and are already aware of him, and even if you haven't, Dixon has more than 200 books under his belt, most of which being on dinosaurs. And his stuff ranges from colorful children's books to more enlightening books based around more complex concepts. So seeing the amount of things he's done, how long he's been around for, and how wide a range the target demographic is for his books, I wouldn't be surprised if you knew about this guy already or at least seen some of his work. Many of his books have won awards, and he's praised by critics for his unique style of thinking when it comes to the study of, well, mainly dinosaurs. But even though his books focus on things like geology and or biology specifically aren't as popular in terms of numbers, they're still seen as amazing pieces of work. And outside of his writing career, he's done an assortment of other things like being a director and projectionist at a movie theater known as the Rec Cinema, being a civilian instructor for the Air Training Corps, and several other things I won't get too deep into. What I'm trying to say is the man's done a lot of things in his life, he's got a lot to be proud of. Now, given you're still unfamiliar with this man and you only know what I've shown you, then you're probably still confused as to how this meme fits into all of this. All of the examples I've given you of his books aren't exactly similar to this image, so what does this have to do with Dougal Dixon? Well, this picture is actually a part of one of his most well-known books titled Man After Man. This is actually his last out of 3 books within a series known as the After series or the After Trilogy, which seems to be his only book series, but one that has a very interesting concept to it. Dixon was inspired by H.G. Wells' novel The Time Machine, a science fiction book that was published in 1895 that heavily involved time travel. Apparently, there were points in this book that featured strange futuristic humanoid creatures known as the Morlocks. Then when the main character travels even farther into the future, they run into a species of very large crab monsters. This was enough to inspire Dixon to create his own comic based around the same story between the ages of 8 and 10. He basically retells the events of these stories and creates his own futuristic creatures. He was fascinated by the idea of having a fictional take on the future evolution for modern animals, while at the same time having a sense of realism applied to it. These books are all within the genre of speculative fiction, and once we take a look at some of the things that came straight from the mind of Dougal Dixon, you'll definitely notice the fictional aspects of it all. But these humanoid creatures, or any of these futuristic creatures that he talks about within his series, aren't just things he came up with on the spot. If you read through the book, you'll see that each humanoid or futuristic creature is specifically the way they are based on how they adapted to the hypothetical situations that Dixon put them through. According to a synopsis on the book on Wikipedia, Man After Man revolves around a hypothetical future that takes place between 2,000 and 5 million years in the future, showing the different evolutionary stages of humanoid beings that got there through means of genetic engineering and natural causes. And you can see this applied with each creature Dixon talks about in his books within this series. Sadly, I can't take a look at these books for myself, as apparently the hard copy versions are actually somewhat rare. Funnily enough, the one book from this series that I was able to find at a decent price around the internet was his After Man book, which was the first and oldest out of the 3 of the series. The other 2 I either can't find anywhere or are offered at extremely high prices. Jesus Christ, almost $1,000 for a used item? What the fuck? Anyways, it's a shame because these books have definitely piqued my interest, and I would love to know more about them aside from what's been provided by the internet. Luckily, I've heard that apparently Dixon is trying to release a new edition of one of his books, the one that I'm personally most interested in, The New Dinosaurs. So I'll try to be on the lookout for that, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. The most I've been able to do as of now is find a PDF file of the whole Man After Man book on the internet. At least I think it's the whole book. Personally, I like to have a hard copy version of something since it's a nice way to collect and keep track of them. But that's just me. But is not being able to read Dixon's book going to stop me from talking about them? Nope. While I won't be able to give personal opinions on the books themselves, since I haven't read them to their fullest, I will try to cover other bases of the books that I can. But we are getting ahead of ourselves talking about Man After Man. So let's go in order with Dixon's first book, After Man. As already mentioned, Dixon was inspired by other works regarding time travel and futuristic creatures, and that inspiration would lead to his own speculations on the evolution of not just humans, but animals as well. This was further influenced by conservationist movements of all things. Apparently in the 1960s, one of these movements were campaigning to save an endangered species of tigers. And this was being aired on TV where Dixon and his father were watching it on. His father then asked the question, why save the tigers? And followed that up with the point that something else would just take its place in the animal kingdom if it were to go extinct. This was something that Dixon described as an unhelpful attitude, but eventually realized the truth behind that statement. Everything does become extinct at some point. It's inevitable for organisms to eventually die out, but Dixon states that other organisms develop to take their place. Eventually he got around to creating this book about the animals of the future, mentioning how some animals would evolve in hypothetical settings, giving it a sense of fiction and logic. This book would dive into a hypothetical future of 50 million years and the several species of wildlife that would come with it. These species that now roam the earth were ones that managed to survive the hypothetical mass extinction and outlive humanity. He would eventually finish a prototype of the book to which he would send to a couple of different publishers. In this early version of his book, he had his own page plans, illustrations, and documents along with it, which not only clearly showed he knew what he was doing and is very organized, but also showed the amount of work and passion that was going into this project. And when he presented this to the 2 publishers, both of them immediately greenlit the project. And you'll notice the obvious differences between his illustrations and the final product's illustrations, and that's because they ended up getting done by several other artists. And I mean several, because there were a total of like 6 different people behind the art itself, including Diz Wallace, John Butler, Brian McIntyre, Philip Hood, Roy Woodard, and Gary Marsh. And the illustrations of these books are arguably one of the most well-known parts of this series, as they are truly some of the strangest yet interesting things that have ever been seen from a book. But the art itself is just so well done. It really captures the abnormality of the animals that Dixon wrote about, and in my opinion does a better job in doing this than the early sketches. But who knows? Maybe if Dixon was given full control, he could have done something similar to capture that same feeling, but the decision in choosing different illustrators was that of the publishers. Even Dixon states in an interview he gave to Tetsu in 2013 that his illustrations should have been in there. Regardless, it would all eventually come together and make the well-known, well-received masterpiece that was After Man. But it wasn't always seen that way. After being published in 1981, it was met by some negative reviews, but over a bit of time people began praising Dixon's work. In fact, there has been so much that has been inspired from his work, and it just goes to show the kind of impact his book really left. Aside from the overall reviews, his book would go on to inspire many to continue into the scientific fields that Dixon was already associated with, along with the fact that the book would go on to thrive in the Japanese markets, garnering him a bigger and more diverse fan base. And there would even be several attempts to get an After Man movie in the works. I don't really have a whole lot of information on that, but after what I've seen and read, I don't think I'm against an idea like that. But one of the more interesting things that have come from his book was the inspiration of the now well-known future predator in the Primeval series. One of the future animals that featured in Dixon's After Man book was called the Night Stalker, which was a large, flightless, and future species of bats. And if you're not familiar with Primeval or the types of animals within this series, one of the animals that was featured was called the Future Predator, which was exactly what the name entails. It was an ugly quadrupedal gray animal from the future, and at one point during the show its DNA was examined, showing that it had what was thought to be scrambled bat DNA. With this, it was concluded that the Future Predator was possibly a species of future bats. When Dixon was asked about this during an interview, he stated that he was sure that this wasn't a coincidence. In fact, Dixon also mentioned in the same interview that he's aware that Tim Haynes, the co-creator of Primeval, actually owns a copy of his book After Man. And another notable piece of media that came from this book was the Japanese fan-made stop-motion documentary featuring the animals from After Man. It was a very amazing way of bringing these animals to life, and even though it's pretty dated, you could see the amount of effort put into this project. You could actually find most of the documentary here on YouTube, but sadly as far as I'm concerned there isn't an English version of it, and the videos that are available to view are in very low quality. Along with that, I believe that some of the parts are also missing. So yeah, sadly as far as watching it through YouTube, there are several issues with it, but if that doesn't really bother you, then I highly recommend it. I'll link the playlist in the credits section of the description down below. Anyways, this first book would leave quite the legacy and would eventually lead to Dixon's next book in the series that wouldn't come out until years later in 1988. This book was titled The New Dinosaurs. While After Man was focused on the animals themselves in futuristic hypothetical ecosystems, The New Dinosaurs was made for the purpose of discussing the concept of zoogeography, which is defined as the branch of zoology that deals with the geographical distribution of animals. While a good part of this book is still focused on the ideas of futuristic dinosaurs, this second entry to the series was created for the purpose of talking about a topic that wasn't widely talked about. And I guess I find this surprising because Dixon could have picked any time period and animals to do this project on, since his overall goal was not to talk about the dinosaurs, but to talk about zoogeography, and he decided to use dinosaurs as the example for this. And good on him for doing that. Dinosaurs are always a good choice, that's what I say. But of course, like his previous project, he really went all out when it came to the evolutionary history of the dinosaurs, as even though their geographical distribution was the main focus, it plays a key role in how they would end up looking by the final product. While After Man was set 50 million years after humans, The New Dinosaurs is actually an alternative world in which the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction never happened, leaving the dinosaurs to continue thriving and evolving. In this world, the continents from the real world remain the same in the book, however the biogeography is different because of the wide variety of fauna. Because of this alternative world is divided into the realms that are listed as the Palearctic realm, the Nearctic realm, the Neotropical realm, the Ethiopian realm, the Oriental realm, the Australasian realm, and the oceans. And what comes of these realms are truly strange, possibly stranger than the creatures of Dixon's previous book. Some of the dinosaurs included in this book are things like aquatic hypsilophodons, alien-looking pachycephalosaurs, strange-looking horned creatures descended from ceratopsids, furry hadrosaur-like creatures called sprintosaurs, and so on. And you could thank the group of illustrators that were a part of this project for the strange depictions of these dinosaurs. Some of the illustrators from his first book of the series, After Man, returned to help out with this project, like Philip Hood and John Butler. But aside from them, we also had this massive list of illustrators that I'm not even gonna cover because I'm too lazy. Here's a picture of it, read it yourself. Out of the 3 books in this series, the one that I'm most interested in has to be this one. I'm relatively new to the idea of speculative evolution, so to me it's a rather strange concept that I'll admit I didn't take too seriously at first. But after researching more and more on this topic, I realized that it makes sense that we as humans would take a deep look into the future like we would for the past. And the fact that this concept is applied to dinosaurs, a topic that I'm not sure if you guys have noticed yet I'm extremely obsessed with, makes it all the more interesting to me. And apparently I'm not the only one who has this idea, as many people really like the new Dinosaurs. Overall, it received positive reception from the general public and critics alike. However, some of Dixon's creations were criticized by paleontologists, with some considering the Link, a giraffe-like pterosaur, to be the worst speculated animal in this book. While I can see why people would argue against the idea of the pterosaur family known as Azhdarchids would eventually abandon the ability to fly and instead become terrestrial and giraffe-like, this is just a speculation of this creature that's put through the hypothetical situation in which it would. So while there is a level of logic applied to it, there's also the possibility that Dixon could be entirely wrong. But again, this is just speculation, so I guess to some extent there really is no right or wrong here. And then others said that Dixon foretold some of the features of dinosaurs that wouldn't be discovered or widely accepted until later on. A good example of this was the use of feathers in his designs for the dinosaurs in his book, which at the time wasn't something that was all that talked about. And apparently this stemmed from the inspiration of the more controversial ideas of dinosaurs at the time. Dixon has mentioned through an interview with Tetsu that he would read work by Robert Bakker and other people like him to get a sense of their ideas on dinosaurs that he could apply to his own book. And as a result, a lot of the ideas that led to the dinosaur designs in the new Dinosaurs are now outdated. When asked if he would do the book differently today, Dixon responded that he would, which makes sense because discoveries in paleontology are happening all the time, constantly changing the overall view of dinosaurs. So I feel like it would only be natural for Dixon to want to make changes to his own designs to fit the modern view of dinosaurs. Anyways, getting back to the series, like After Man, the new Dinosaurs left quite a footprint. It's also led to the inspiration of well-known pieces of media like Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong film. In this film, which is supposed to take place in the early 1930s, the prehistoric creatures that reside on Skull Island are all descended from creatures that lived in the prehistoric eras that were dominated by dinosaurs. I don't think this idea was given this much consideration in the original 1933 film, since the idea of speculative evolution and or biology wasn't as widely talked about at that point. But by the time the 2005 remake came along, it served as a great explanation for the existence of dinosaurs in the film, and the designers for these creatures were inspired by Dixon's work. But aside from that, I think the strangest thing that came from this book was the Japanese manga under the same name. And based on what I can find on it, apparently the dinosaurs in this book have a lot of interactions between both themselves and real-world animals. According to what I can find, the manga is based around a lot of the dinosaurs from the new Dinosaurs book, but here they live in an alternative world in which modern, real-life animals also manage to evolve and live alongside these future dinosaurs. Aside from that, I really can't find much on it, and while you'd never see me with a manga in my hands, I would be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit interested in this. And lastly, there would have also been attempts at getting other projects off the ground based around the idea of speculative evolution in dinosaurs. One of the most well-known of these projects was the Speculative Dinosaur Project, and boy did this project have a history of development hell. In fact, this seems to have enough for it to be its own video that I may do in the future, but don't expect it anytime soon because there's a lot to that story. Going back to the After series, unlike the new Dinosaurs, Dixon's next book wouldn't take long to publish. While there was a 7-year period between After Man and the new Dinosaurs, Man After Man would come out in 1990, only 2 years after the new Dinosaurs. And according to what I can find, Dixon wasn't actually too happy with this project. It seems that Man After Man was originally supposed to be about, as Dixon mentions it, a current world collapsing through overpopulation, famine, and so on, and the idea that mankind needs to escape destruction. And the idea was that humans would invent time travel and go millions of years into the future where they would settle and start a new civilization there, only for all of that man-made destruction to happen again. And this was actually supposed to connect back to After Man, as the first events in the original concept of Man After Man would be the very thing that would impact the evolution of the animals of the far future that were featured in After Man. At least that's what I'm getting out of this interview that they had here. But this original concept was actually scrapped, and the only thing that was kept from it was the name Man After Man for what ended up getting published. This version of Man After Man is one that Dixon was apparently not too fond of, and even called it a disaster of a project at one point in the interview. So what did Man After Man end up being about then? Well, like the other two books, Man After Man explores future evolution, this time for humans and through means of genetic engineering and technological abilities that would actually speed up evolution for them. This time it focused more on climate change, and the book itself is presented more as an anthology than a field guide-like book as the previous two were presented. Rather than the informational narrative that you would typically see in these kind of books, Man After Man is told through short stories centered around specific future humanoids and their lives. It's kind of strange, but that doesn't mean there isn't an informational aspect to it, because there still is, it's just not as present as it is with the other two books. Why this change was made, I have no idea, but seeing how Dixon was hesitant to join in and help out with this project, I'm willing to bet it's due to the fact that the decision for change was not up to him. And while I'm actually glad that we ended up getting the final product as it is, it's always sad to see great creators not being given the proper creative control they should be given. It's clear that Dixon doesn't limit his imagination when it comes to speculative evolution. In another interview on a website known as Ough, he was asked by the interviewer, how difficult is it for a scientist to speculate possibilities? To which he gave an amazing response. He said, "What I do is an exploration of possibilities. I do not state that this is going to happen. There are scientists, I shall not name them, who are so restricted by the rules of their science that they cannot let their imagination run when it comes to speculation, and their imagined future is dull and unexciting." And I can't help but feel like because the overall initial concept for Man After Man was changed, Dixon was forced to come up with several future humanoid species for a book project he was reluctant to help out with. That in itself can be pretty limiting, as he clearly didn't want to go into this direction, yet because it did, he now needed to apply that same type of thinking he used for his previous two books that he actually wanted to work on and create something because he was obligated to. Now this is just my own speculation based on what I've read. Who knows, maybe this aspect of the book's development was Dixon's favorite part, as it meant he would be able to use that imagination of his to create more future species. But this is a man who clearly has a set goal for what he wants to talk about and loves to let his imagination roam free. But when there's interference or disruptions to that goal, then the final product may not be as good as it could have been. And while Man After Man had the most criticism towards its science out of the three, it still had positive scores all around, so luckily this wasn't entirely the case. Some people pointed out that it felt it had more emphasis on the fiction part of science fiction, as there are certain creatures that are heavily dependent on the technological advances of the future that they quite literally become one with them, like the aquamorph and the vacuumorph that have been created in a way where they can rely on their own bodies to protect them in the environments they're in. When it was pointed out by one reviewer that spacesuits just seem like a cheaper and more economical choice to go with than creating our own creatures. And I can actually see why people would have these kinds of criticisms towards the book, as I believe these kinds of choices would affect our overall evolution. But this is coming from a guy who found this book series through a meme, so who am I to say? Because his previous two works had a sense of logic and scientific accuracy intermingled with a healthy dose of science fiction, I guess people expected the same out of Man After Man. And who could blame them? As I mentioned earlier, Dixon is the kind of person that likes to mix his imagination with the world of science fiction and doesn't like to be completely tied down to a strict rule, which is what makes his work so unique. There's a lot of people that try too hard to apply those rules of science to their speculation, resulting in the unexciting and dull world he described them as earlier. But at the same time, too much fiction will keep people from taking it seriously, since a sense of logic would feel absent. Of course, I can't say what is and what isn't present in these books, as I've never read them, but based on what I've read and or watched that also includes the ideas of science and science fiction, I do understand that there needs to be a right amount of both to take a story or a movie or a game seriously. And according to some of these reviews, it didn't always feel this way for the book. Regardless, it would still be seen as a crucial part of the After Trilogy, and it served as the final book. Regardless of its supposed lack of science, people still found it entertaining and fun, so there's at least that. But it's still sad to hear that Dixon still didn't quite get to make the book that he wanted, but luckily the original concept for Man After Man didn't go to waste. Dixon would go on to make another book on speculative evolution outside of the After Trilogy called Green World. This book was written in 2010 and it has all of the ideas that he initially wanted to pour into Man After Man. From what I can gather, the premise revolves around a colony of 10,000 people emigrating to another planet after destroying Earth with their human-like ways, only to make the same mistakes again on this new planet known as Green World. Sadly, this book was a Japan exclusive, so I couldn't tell you much about what the actual contents of the book contained, but it seemed that Dixon was able to incorporate the ideas he wanted, and it was mainly illustrated by himself. Prior to Green World and in regards to the After series, the most consistent illustrator that he had with him was Philip Hood, as he was responsible for all of the illustrations in Man After Man. Little did he know at the time that his creation would be turned into this, a meme to haunt innocent people. Anyways, there's been talk about Dixon wanting to release an English edition of Green World, something that I will definitely check out if that ever happens. Going into this video, I thought I was going to be covering an obscure and wild concept from the mind of a crazy person. But actually looking into it, Dougal Dixon is considered a genius among scientists, even being labeled as a significant founder of speculative evolution. His works have brought him onto other projects like being a consultant on the show The Future is Wild, and being featured in a Discovery Channel show known as Natural History of an Alien. Aside from that, it seems that he continues his career in paleontology and as an author, as his latest books have been released in 2020. Doing this video has seriously opened my eyes to this area of science. While I wouldn't say I didn't know about speculative evolution prior to finding out about Dougal Dixon's series on it, I will say that I haven't acknowledged it to this extent before. And I feel like doing the research for this video has helped me become more interested in this field, and it's definitely one that I'm going to look into again in the future with other topics that I cover. Friendly reminder that this all came from a meme. Okay, bye. If you guys made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you so much, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was another big project that I really did not know was going to take me a month to complete, but yeah, here we are. I'm looking at the calendar right now, and my last upload was apparently on right before Christmas, on the 24th, and given that I'm uploading this on the 24th of this month, that literally means I haven't uploaded in a solid month. So I do apologize for that. I've been pretty busy this month. I did not realize that I was going to start 2021 off so occupied, but I was. Luckily, I've, been doing my best to at least keep the channel as alive as possible with the live streams and everything. That way there's at least a little bit of activity there. And I feel like they've been holding up pretty well. So, and that actually kind of leads me into my next thing. In case you guys didn't see it from the community tabs, basically what I'm going to be doing from now on is I'm going to be live streaming every Saturdays. I'm gonna aim for at least 5 p.m. on Saturdays, but really it could be any time in the afternoons or evenings. The time will heavily vary because I never know what I have going on that day. So yeah, no promises on a specific time, but I am gonna at least try to do it every Saturday. With the exception of the live stream this week, which I do apologize for not letting you guys know when I was gonna, that I moved it to Friday instead of Saturday for reasons of my own. But regardless, the reason why I'm doing this is because this is going to be my way of keeping the channel a bit active while I work on these bigger projects, because I realize now that I really like doing these bigger scaled projects a lot better than what I did in all throughout 2020 with these smaller topical things that I just tended to cover. But I feel like these larger scaled projects covering topics that aren't widely talked about in this style, I feel like it's definitely something I'm more proud of doing than all of the stuff that I've done in 2020. Not to say that I'm not proud of some of the stuff that came out of 2020. I like some of the content that I made last year, but I feel like this year I need to step it up a bit in terms of production and quality. I just want to create something that I'm proud of, and I want it to be all of my videos. I'm really tired of only feeling proud of one video every 10 uploads. I want to be proud of all of those uploads. I want to be able to be proud of all of the videos that I make. And I never really felt that way about all of my content in 2020. But I feel like, with a fresh start in 2021, and with the list of content that I'm planning on covering this year, I feel like I'll finally get that feeling of being satisfied with all of my videos. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do out of 2021. That's my goal here. And don't get me wrong, it will definitely be on stuff that I genuinely want to cover. It'll definitely be on stuff that you guys, I'm pretty sure, will find interesting, because again, I am trying to find stuff that isn't widely talked about. And I've compiled a little list of things that I want to get through by the end of the year, as I mentioned in the beginning of the episode. Topics I'm pretty sure you guys will find interesting. It all relates to dinosaurs, of course, because this is a dinosaur-related channel. Some of these topics aren't talked about nearly as much as others, and the ones that are talked about a lot, I have a plan for how I want to go about presenting those in a way that's, you know, different and unique from other people's videos. So I do have a bit of a plan for this year, but at the same time, I'm kind of going with the flow. So we'll see when this next upload comes, because I do have something else planned. But with everything that's going on right now, it's kind of hard to plan out when that's going to be coming out. Hopefully within this next month, but again, no promises. I do have to go back to school this Monday, actually. College does start back up this Monday, so I do have to take care of that before anything. But just to give you guys, you know, just a little bit of something to, you know, hold on to, you know, before I go. This next video is going to be a smaller scaled video. I don't see it being too long, but it's going to kind of be in the same style as this one, hopefully with the same type of quality that you saw today. So yeah, basically that's all I'm going to give you. I don't want to spoil anything because I'm genuinely excited about this video right here. That I'm gonna work on after I release this one. But I still have to edit this one because at the time that I'm recording this part, I still have not finished editing. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But before I go, of course, if there's anything that I got wrong and you guys want to correct me, or you want to add something that I maybe missed, do not hesitate to comment it down below, because sometimes I do make mistakes. I am only human. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please have a nice day.